We got that videoed. I just don't physically have it and yeah. I told Mark today that I'm still trying to.
Five o'clock, we will get started with the March 16th, 2023, the Water and Sewer Authority of Cabarrus County. Looks like we have a quorum. Jennifer will not be with us. Haven't heard from either Lynn or Rob, so we do have a quorum, so we'll get started. First item on the agenda is unfinished business requests for approval of the minutes from February 16th. Do I hear a motion for that approval? A motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion carries. We will move on to new business. Michael is going to present our budget for the upcoming year.
Sent out the budget message earlier, and I'm not going to read through that for you, but we want to cover some high points in the budget for you. Again, I'm recommending a 7.9% increase in the variable rate for the current year. I mean, that will bring in an additional $915,850. Budgeted flows are the same as last year. We're basically seeing the rainfall kind of smoothing out. Flows are basically the same as last year. I also have a chart to show that to you in a little bit. Budgeted flows 7,045,000,000 gallons. I did do a small shift budgeted between Mount Pleasant, Harrisburg. Mount Pleasant's flows are down a little bit more from the rain, and then Harrisburg's are up, so there's about 15 million gallon shift between those two. Fixed charges are decreased slightly. We paid off the phase one upgrade SRF loan, so that savings will be passed down on fixed charges. Dropping down to expenses, I'm recommending a 3% across the board rate raise for employees with up to a 4% in merit. I wish I could do more, but with pressure of this budget, this doesn't feel like it's justified at this time. But I do hope we can find a way to fund this, leave it in the budget of 7% total salaries and benefits of $346,975. I left the $20,000 in budget each year for career ladder. We have a series of classes that employees can take and get additional skill level increases. We've never used the 420 each year, but we continue to budget in hopes that more of our employees will take advantage of that. Again, the state retirement system increased our retirement contribution rate from 12.10% to 12.85%. That's another $34,671. I included 5% increase in the premiums for health insurance, and that was almost $50,000. And then the big items come up. Chemicals increased $314,838. We continue to see increases. This is one of the big line items that Mark and I talked about several times. Initially, the amount was significantly higher than this. He had budgeted for some flow increases and some other things. I told him if the flows increase significantly, that we would find the money or come back to the board. So we just increase budget for 10% increase in our chemical costs during the year. Total increase in the budget on that is $314,838. Utilities, you'll remember either last month or the month before we came to the board and asked for $500,000 to cover the utility cost. Power going up, power investment on the board. When we adopted the budget last year, we didn't know about that increase, so we had to come in the middle of the year and ask for it. We're gonna go ahead and budget it this year. I don't know what, if they will reduce the purchase power adjustment this year or not, or if it'd be more or the same, so we're budgeting the same amount. And we'll come back if it's up and let you know. Just want to mention also, that's fine. I just want to mention, I've also recommended in the budget to increase the septic hauler rate from 5.5 cents a gallon to 6 cents a gallon. That will raise an additional $50,000. It's a significant $450,000. It's only $50,000. They did not get an increase last year, so felt like we've just got to increase the right this year. I will send out a complete package of the budget this year electronically, as you asked me to do in the past. And I'll send out 2 supplemental sections, one that has 4 years of actual current year budget, and then the requested budget is under one of the sections that's included, and then the other section with the detail line items requested by the department. So the general budget package is on one PDF file, and those other 2 are on 2 other PDF files you'll get in the email. This is a budget summary here. $21,668,220. Balanced budget. Next. As y'all know, on the revenue side, 57% of our money comes from the variable charge. 31% comes from the fixed charges. So those charges cover about 88%, 88.5% of the cost of operating our facility, and the other costs come from basically outside sources or investment earnings. And you can see the plant is the biggest section of our costs, about 35%. That service is now 26.66%, and that's without our first principal payment. That's still only interest only on the $65 million fund issue. This is a chart of our dollars of capital this system development fees collected. We are on target with that 3.2 million is budgeted in the yellow for this year. We're getting budgeted that again. I don't know what the economy is going to do for our proposed increase in system development fees that we'll have this year, but felt comfortable in budgeting that amount until we get more information. This chart's not in the budget, but it is actual units, 5/8 inch units, collections from July 2020 to date. The blue bars are July's, the circled bars are February. And as you can see, we're seeing a trend down in the monthly units of 5/8 connections since 2020. This will make the board aware of what we're seeing. This is our billable flow. You'll see that peak one of 7,965,000,000 gallons with the 18-19 fiscal year, which is when it brought the capacity issue to the forefront. And you can see the next 2 years as the flow started going back down. 21-22 dropped below the 7 billion level, and looks like we're going to stay in that same range this year and projecting the same range for next year. this is just a chart of our outstanding principal debt. As we paid off our SRF loans, it dropped down. And then we issued the 65 million, and you can see where our principal debt outstanding. It's gone back up over $65 million. Just letting you know the amount of system development fees we have on hand. We're estimating at the end of this fiscal year, we'll have about $8.7 million of system development fees on hand. And there are some plans to use those in the upcoming CIP. Just wanted to show you how much we have, and you can see that in the future we have plans already in there to use those accumulated fees. Then the thing you're most interested in is this page by jurisdiction. The top section is your fixed charges. The bottom or middle section is your variable charges, and the bottom is the total. You'll see on the far right hand side in the top column, everyone's cost went down in fixed charges except for Harrisburg. Harrisburg's went up because their 5-year average flow went up higher as a percentage than everybody else's did. Their flow went from 9.55% to 10.11%. So while they would have normally gotten a decrease if their flows hadn't changed, their flow increased as a percentage more than anyone else's. So they have a small increase. On the middle column or the middle section, you'll see the variable charges. Again, I moved 15 million gallons from Mount Pleasant's budget to Harrisburg's budget. So you see a small decrease in budgeted costs for Mount Pleasant based on gallons used. And then everyone else's, that shows the impact of the 7.9% charges. And the summary at the bottom or the last column. And that's all I have on the operating budget. So I have a lot more detail I'm sending out for you to look over. And if you have any questions on the budget right now, I'll be glad to answer those.
Any questions for Mike on the budget so far?
Like the system development fee potential changes to those two different fees, any idea? I know that's kind of quick to digest, but on what the impact will be.
You mean in new connections or in dollars?
In dollars, I mean, is that going to be a huge impact?
I don't think it will be a huge impact. Well, like $900 more for a residential unit and $400 or $500 less on the apartments. Don't see that would have any real impact on housing starts. I can't forecast what's going to happen with the economy and if those units are going to. I wouldn't think that would make a major difference.
We currently have, you charge one fee now, so this will be new, right?
Right now, way before the system developed, we only had capital recovery, and we did charge two different.
No, go ahead.
We have developed enough information over the past several years with the Willis report and with our tracking of connections and those kinds of things to be able to identify what's really being done. The records indicate that the vast majority of houses are 3 and 4 bedrooms. So we came up with the 3 and then the vast majority of apartments are 22 bedrooms. And then we allowed for if they're above the two, to go into the third category of, the regular residential. That's based on the information we actually seeing, and we didn't have that kind of information at the last system development. So we feel like it's more fair. I would have liked to see it a little bit higher for the apartments, but the numbers are the numbers.
So we have interest only on the bond issue for this budget. And next year we'll have a full payment at the budget.
We do, but we do have it. We do have it covered with the debt that's going away and the debt that and the fixed charge that we have set aside, and not as debt service, but as a fixed charge.
So
So we do not feel like in the next first debt principal payment, we will have an increase in fixed charges.
for next year, you mean?
Next year. You're at 65 million. The next issue we have for the phase 4.
Different story.
It's gonna be a significant increase. Wendy has been working on it, and as we fine tune it a little bit, we may have some numbers to give you next week, just so you can know as you think about the CIP.
Thinking longer term planning is what the next 3 or 4 years looks like with that.
And we need to know whether you want to wait till the principal kicks in on the next one, or whether you want to start.
Yeah, that was my only question is, and maybe this year's too early, but should we ease into that a little so it's not such a stark impact in 2 years?
Once we see the impact, it'll make it easier for you to make that decision.
Do you think we'll have that before we adopt this budget in case we want?
We can give you some forecasts pretty quick next month.
That'd be good to have just before we adopt this budget, just to know. Any other questions?
2 quick questions, real quick, Mike, here, the career ladder, is that something that you obviously give that for folks that take certain classes and things like that? Does that keep them in the same step and grade or classification or pay range, or is that like a promotionary?
It's more like a promotion, isn't it?
That is
They
correct.
move up a pay grade.
One pay grade.
Yeah.
With
They
a
move up
5% increase.
A 5% increase. Okay. And they have to meet before a committee after they've had the classes. They have to meet before a committee and demonstrate certain skills, and
Yeah,
Robin can give you a better update. It's not
it's,
just attending classes. You
No,
have to
no.
demonstrate competence.
you have to demonstrate your competencies. We have, like, we'll take the wastewater treatment plant operator, it's level 1 to a level 4. They have to get to a level 4, they have to have their grade 4 certification. So they've got to pass all of those tests to get there. Plus, they have to take on more responsibility and prove that they can do that and prove that they have the skill set that we've set in the criteria. They meet before the management team and go through a complete process of an interview and providing that skill set. And then they get a 5% increase in their move to that pay grade.
Okay. And it's not automatic and easy. That's why some of our employees don't get into it. And strictly, it's not just a matter of sitting through classes and getting it. They don't want to go through the process of being interviewed and demonstrating competencies and those kinds of things.
That's why we haven't used the full 20 every year, right?
Right, that's why we don't use the full thing.
The other question I had on the rates, and maybe bring it back up, but are both the fixed and the variable rates based on the 5-year low average from the communities? Or is it just the fixed?
The fix is just on the 5-year average. The other one is just total gallons divided into what's the operating cost. So everybody pays the same on a variable rate. This is based on the gallons, what makes it variable.
Everybody pays the same per gallon,
Right.
and then however much you use,
Right.
gotcha.
Right.
That's all I have.
Yep.
Got a question?
As far as chemical usage, I know that's one of the big increases this budget. With the upgrades at the plant, will that usage fall?
Correct, it will be impacted, the gallons used will probably decrease. I will hesitate to say that the dollars spent will go down because the chemicals go up every year, it seems like, but part of what we're seeing, and I'll show you when I show some aerial photos, there's some tankage being put on the front side of our aeration basins that we don't have now that are called anoxic zones. And it's really to recover some pH. Right now, a big chunk of what we spend is for alkalinity control and for adjusting pH. And with making that change, we will offset a good bit of that money that's being consumed right now for the lime.
So you said lime, so it's calcium, not magnesium.
It's actually a combination of it. It's actually a lime mag slurry mix.
Okay.
It's been expressed to us through the design that our power cost and our chemical cost, even though we're expanding the plant larger, will be the same, if not slightly less. Because we're going from a 40-year-old oxygen plant to brand new turbo blowers, and we're upgrading a lot of equipment, so that even though we're going to be processing more volume, that we should see a per unit kilowatt usage go down some with an upgrade. You would hope so in an upgrade.
Robin, do you, are you seeing retention and recruitment issues increasing, mounting, or is it a roller coaster ride, or what's your general take on that?
It is, it has been difficult. We've had a wastewater operator's position open for over 180 days. And we just had an operator that we terminated within the first 6 months because he simply just did not get it. So we are seeing it much more difficult to fill the positions, and then retention has become slightly an issue as well, because we're just not pulling in the quality applicants that we have been so accustomed to in the past. We are losing a supervisor back to Gastonia, which we really hate, but Gastonia has made the deal pretty sweet and taking him off nights, and and we ask, I said, is there anything that we can do to sweeten the pot? And he's like, no, I'm going back. So he goes back to Gastonia, picks up where he left off with all of his seniority, his vacation pay, et cetera. So, I can't compete with that.
When was the last time we did a salary study?
We actually did one, remember, in 2021. And what is I believe,
Last year.
was it 22? Well, it may have been May of 22. We did a salary study, and then because we did class and comp in 22, I believe. And so we'll do another study, just pay class in the next budget year.
Other questions? All right,
We want to set any
yeah,
budget work sessions for the bank.
we've not lately in the past few years set those, but if you'd like some more time, we can set a special work session. Not sure there's a whole lot of complications to this budget from what I gather, but certainly can if there's a desire to do so.
Seems pretty straightforward.
I think so.
I'm not certain what question to ask would be. It's something we've been doing all along, very minor changes.
You're in no need for that. Assuming that's the consensus, we'll roll on. We do need to set up public hearing for the budget. So I'd entertain a motion to set that for June 15th, 2023.
So moved.
Second. Motion a second. Any discussion on those? All there, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
One
Set
more
the-
question, Mr. Chairman. I need to send out a notification to the jurisdictions by the end of April. For the rates, I don't know. We'll wait till the next meeting. to Authorize that, or do you want to go in and authorize the rates?
Concerned about that, or would you rather wait? to see the Hearing.
Well, I don't know if it's important that we have a hearing, but I'd like to at least look at them. And then, be able to make comment back, because I share the same concern that you did, Mike, which is, we might be undershooting ourselves a little bit, knowing the amount of debt service we have coming up, and we might want to get ahead of that with actual larger rate increases and
Even it out a little bit.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, I guess the fixed rate would potentially go up. If we wanted to do that.
You should have. 3
I don't think it's that big a deal to wait until the next meeting, make sure everybody's comfortable and send the numbers. I mean, I'm okay with you sending the jurisdictions a preliminary number, but I don't know that
I'd prefer to wait till it's set in stone, and y'all can let your staff know what we're proposing, and they can build that in.
Why don't you just let the jurisdictions decide what we want to build to our staffs, and then, all right. We'll just shoot for the next meeting to try to nail that down. In the meantime, you'll give us sort of estimates and some projections on the next bond issue and what that impact might look like. So that's good. All right. Okay, let's roll on to the next item, which is the proposed capital improvement program. So Michael, take it away.
Before I get to that part of the budget, I want to go ahead and present the system development fee.
Okay.
Came out too late getting in the actual budget presentation. I don't know whether you want me to start it at the beginning of this report and cover the different options, or just talk about this combined cost approach. And so I can talk about the combined cost approach, and we can talk about the other ones if the board has any concern.
That's probably fine.
Okay. And get to the combined cost approach, you look at first, you look at the buy-in approach, which is you look at all your old assets and say, how much would it cost for somebody to buy into that? The incremental approach looks at just the new construction and looks at the cost of just buying into that. And then the combined approach looks at both the combined old assets you have in the system plus the new assets you have in the system. Get the value of those, divide that with all the discounts and all the things that the statutes require. There's a number of things listed that they have to take into consideration to reduce the net value of the system, but we end up with a net value of $370 million or $371 million worth of assets. You see the capacity of the plant and the calculation of reaching $10.60 per gallon per day of capacity. Going back to the 80 gallons per bedroom per day, or the minimum, which we have to live with right now is 160, whether it's 1 or 2 bedroom. The multifamily cost calculated this way would be $1,696. We used on the family, we used 3.5 bedrooms, 280 gallons a day, $2,968. The reason, after talking with Raptellus, we had some concerns about the different methods. The vast majority of use the combined approach. We currently have about 5 million gallons of capacity in the current system, 3 million tied up with developer control in the jurisdiction. And some amount of remaining. So we really have old capacity and new capacity. This one is most definitely the one that we can defend the most. Even though it is lower than the incremental one. We feel like this is the one that is fairest to all the future connections and most justifiable if we were challenged in court. Again, 1 to 2 bedrooms for multifamily would be the 1696. Multifamily above 2 bedrooms would fall into the 2968, along with the 16 single family.
Questions?
You're required now by statute to update these on a regular basis.
Every 5 years, we'll have a statute to hire an outside consultant that's qualified, and they list some qualifications, which we hired Raftell's Financial Consulting. The statute has a number of steps that you have to follow. Discounts and different things, for debt and for different credits and different things to come up with a net value that you use to do the calculation. It doesn't say which method you have to use. It just gives you a list of the three. And it's up to you to defend those, whichever one you choose.
And that was me. My next question is, are they gonna review all these? I mean, because they're gonna get flooded with them. The state.
The state's not gonna deal at all. It's gonna be up to the developers. My question, which method we pick.
When they sue us next time, we'll have this.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's gonna be interesting because this law came about because of all the lawsuits.
And we do not have to adopt this fee. This is the maximum fee we can adopt. We can adopt any fee below this that we want to adopt.
And Mike, to be clear that I'm understanding this, we're basically valuing our entire asset class, the net sewer system combined, $370 million. We're dividing that by the 35 million gallons that we can treat per day, and we're coming up with the 1060 per ERU. Calculation would then get us to the nearly 1,700 and nearly 3,000 that we have there.
Our current charge is 2,040.
And we did
We don't
this,
have 2 steps.
we did this the first time, didn't we?
We did this at the first time. Used slightly different numbers for the gallons per day. I went back and looked at it. It started with 200 gallons and then added a I&I factor, which is something we didn't do this time. It came up with 255 gallons or something per household. We didn't have a breakdown for multifamily, so a lot of different things went into this one than last time, and we didn't have all the expansion project into this one either, in the last one.
And when this says includes outstanding debt, that includes our new debt service, the 65.
Includes the new debt and the future debt, actually, too,
How far out?
the 10-year window.
A full 10-year window?
The statute says you have to look at a minimum of 10 and a maximum of 20 years. And 10 was kind of squirrely anyway. I don't know how you do a 20-year one. We can go back to the other calculations if you want to go through those, but
Sound like this is the most defensible though.
Yeah, so this is what we do right now. This past 5 years, we've done the combined approach. And that seems to make sense. I mean, buy-in just doesn't work. Buy-in makes more sense if you're not a growing system. You know, if you're just truly buying in. And then the incremental actually kind of does fit what we're doing. I mean, we are doing more expansion projects, and it was actually borne out when we talked to Raftellus when they said we actually had more expansion projects than anybody else that they were working with. And so, you know, I think we could probably justify the incremental, but that's the minority of folks who do that across the state. I mean, there may be a handful at most who do that. The biggest chunk do either the buy-in or the combined approach. And so the combined approach does make sense. I don't think the buy-in works for us because we are doing an expansion and that should be factored into it. But for instance, if you did the incremental approach, all of a sudden it's $5,000 for a single family house. Now, to Mike's point, we don't have to charge. That's just the maximum that Rap tells us. We could always come down off that, just like we could come down off this. And we did have some concern of like, you know, apartments coming down right now, apartments, single family being both 2040 apartments coming down. But I think that does make sense here in that we've gone down from 120 per bedroom to 80. And so this is just apartments that are 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. So that's 160. And so if you look at it, 160, and then the houses we know have gotten larger. So if you're factoring in a 3.5 bedroom, 280, then those prices do make sense there, that apartments would be a lower fee than a single family with for veterans.
And at present, they're all the same.
They're all the same, yeah, 2040. So, you know, it is an increase for houses of about $900. And then
I've
it's,
seen a shift in the development patterns that support what we're doing here, so makes sense to do it this way.
So what's the date certain that this change takes place?
July 1st.
So any apartment complex that has already been approved, would they have been paying the older fee? And even if it's after July 1st before they start up,
Depends on when they pull it from me.
when they pull the permit?
We need to be real clear on that this year.
If you're an apartment, you're gonna wanna wait.
Yeah. Pump the brakes part of it.
yeah,
You're thinking.
that is a little.
That's right.
You know, exactly.
Purpose back.
Yeah.
Weird.
If we hear from the same company, then
That's right.
won't be surprised, but.
I did this without William's permission. He sent me an email that kind of outlines the drop dead dates on this. We've already missed the early timeline, but we're in the flexible timeline in the middle. We have to post our study for 45 days on the website for public comment. Then we have to have a public hearing, which we would schedule for May 18th. And then have the final vote to adopt it at our June meeting, be effective on July 1st.
I know the last time we thought we did a very effective job of communicating the changes and I don't think we had that many who were surprised by it, although we of course had the one.
We just, I mean, I think it actually was pretty smooth, other than that, the one that we ran into an issue with. But I agree, I think it's getting the news out there to everybody.
I think it is, and you know, too many people are getting their permits electronically these days, doesn't work as well, but the last one, we actually had paper available when they came in to pull permit, so they could see what the changes were gonna be and when. But maybe worthwhile to do that again and see what way we can do that. Do a sell to advertise to the users.
And I'm not sure what each, separate jurisdiction does. But we update our fee schedule obviously every year. And we put it on our development folks to communicate with boots on the ground. Because they're the ones pulling permits every day, right? Hey, we're ready for a meter. We might be ready to communicate and say, hey, you want this year's fee, you might want to get in before July because it's going up, or who knows who's making that decision. And then there's always somebody that has faux outrage that they didn't know and they weren't told, but at least if the field folks are able to communicate, that tends to help us.
And really, with single family, you know, they're paying it when they're getting their permit. So maybe 1 permit, 10 permits, 20 permits, but it's not huge numbers, but apartments is where we run into the real sticker shock, but now it's going the other direction, potentially.
I'm not sure. Most of you have system development fees in your jurisdiction, and if you're on the 5-year cycle with the initial one, the rest of you will be adopting new fees this year also, so. I don't know yet how our combined fees are gonna work, whether they're gonna be more or less overall.
I'll say ours is still buy-in, but ours has ended up the same way with the 2 separate. That'll be new for us right now. We charge 1 per unit, so we'll have to get adjusted to the new way of doing business with those 2 different fees. But
Is the July 1st date? Is that a magic number? I mean, I get that start of the fiscal year.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
it can't start.
yeah, that's right. It needs to start July 1. And that's what we did, the Titan Speedy, just in case we needed some extra time. If this has got bumped back a month, we could still get there, but we were proposing to go ahead and get it posted by April 3rd, so then we can have public hearing in May and then approve it in June 15th. You could actually do the public hearing and vote to approve June 15th if we needed to.
So do we need to set a public hearing on this specific issue? Is that what you're looking for May 18th?
Yeah.
If everybody's comfortable with this, or?
We can set it May at the April meeting if you want to, if you want to set it now.
I think we were just looking to see if you guys are okay with us going ahead and posting it, but before we posted it, we wanted to run it by the board. The key there is just we have to post it 45 days before the public hearing.
Might as well set the public hearing, so then there's no question that we've decided to move forward with this. Is that reasonable?
I think so.
Unless you want to discuss it and. unless we go with it.
I like the method and I like the amount. I would go with the more conservative method and the maximum amount. Otherwise, I would move up to the incremental. I mean, we're gonna have. The tough part is it's 5 years, right? So we have debt coming on that we don't know about yet.
Well, really, we should do it more often. That's how you have to do it.
Yeah,
We-
there's nothing to say we couldn't,
And we do it every year.
yeah, engage Raftellus to do it again next year.
But I wouldn't, I don't think we have to go there yet. But I certainly don't want to set this too low. So I like the conservative approach, but setting it at the $10.60 and taking the max. I wouldn't want to go down from that amount because I the gut feeling, but I feel like it's too low already. But we'll see.
Yeah, I was surprised too.
Was there a motion to set the public hearing on this topic for May 18th?
So moved.
Is there any other discussion, questions on that? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? All right, we're good to go. All right. Improvements.
That's improved. I didn't get a chance to get CIP out to all of you. You have a copy, at your. iPad, when you have a run sheet, along with it, but I know it's so difficult to read the screen there. But only you have the same 11 by 17. We'll figure it out. We'll have to do that too. This is not our normal CIP. Normally, we have a combined CIP that includes all our upgrade and maintenance and large items along with expansion. Because the master plan will not be complete until sometime this summer. We had a special requirement in our master plan that they give us expansion projects early so we can complete the system development fee calculations and get those to Raftellus. We received those in late January and started working with them, trying to get everything lined up. We had to tell Raftellus how we intended to fund these projects and what the timing and those kinds of things. So we worked with Raftellus and that was good. None of this has to be done in these years. None of it has to be paid for in these years. We can move them or slide them either way. However we try to do it. This is just a program or a plan. We have put a lot of items in revenue bonds because we don't know how the funding may work in the future. We may have adequate internal funds to fund part of this. We may system develop these may be higher or lower, so we can tell some of those things. Just to be safe, we listed a lot of the projects that are being funded by a revenue bond. As you can see, the total for the 10-year period is 643 million or 644 million if you'll round it off over a 10-year period. This averages out to about 65 million a year. So it's significant. We've got the 30 million expansion in there that's underway, the 34 million that's million expansion that's under design right now. We have the Muddy Creek expansion listed in there, and we also have the phase 5 construction up to 40 million, which we don't know what the amount will be until we get our permits and do some more work after the master plan, but we've included it in there just to have it in the plans. The CIP booklet I gave you has a description of each project. what it does, the length of the lines. What we're addressing. So there's other information in there. I will email you a electronic copy, but I did provide you the hard copy since I didn't get a chance to get that out to you ahead of the meeting. I'm not gonna ask you to approve the CIP tonight. I'd rather wait until we adopt the budget and ask you to approve our CIP at that time. I just wanted to get it in our hands and let you know, this is the basis for the system development fee calculation. They looked at all these projects and included them in the calculations.
Is the 40 million number based upon just an estimate of what the next expansion past the 34 is? It's not a number that somebody has said, okay, now we calculate this. I know we have a study going on to do that. That's just a what if it costs, what if it takes us to get to 40, right? Am I assuming correctly?
Correct. I think with their study of the plant through the master planning process, that was kind of the quick back of the napkin number that looked like made sense to go to. That very number could definitely end up being 38. It could be 42. It could be 40, you know, whatever. Once you start factoring in what population and flow projections are, when you start digging more into where are your bottlenecks within the plant, because you're always going to have bottlenecks that are moving to different locations, and some bottlenecks can get more expensive than others. And so all of that will be factored in, but it's just kind of a good number, a 6 MGD expansion to consider.
Is that a number that is the calculated total load capacity of the river at that location?
No.
It's just, hey, we picked this number, we're gonna work at this number until we get a different number. Okay.
Correct.
And we may not even do that. We may do a scalping plant further up the river. Those are the options we're looking at right now. It's just more of just to show that we're looking at an expansion.
Yeah,
beyond the 34.
And it's a good example he talked of. It may be when they get in there studying that if we can go to 38 at the plant, really, I won't say easily or efficiently, but without doing a lot to our influent pump stations and everything. But if we go above that, then we're looking at huge cost in influent pump stations. So maybe it makes sense to go to 38 and start the design of a plan of a plant up Cottle Creek or up Rocky River. That's a 5 or an 8 MGD plant that treats wastewater but sends the solids to the plant. That, you know, trying to look at it holistically, not just what does total system cost look like.
I guess I was thinking further down the road in that from 34 to 40 is only a 6 million gallon increase. And I'm surely hoping there's more capacity than that out there, because by the time we get to 34, 40 will be already identified and rejected and everything else along the way. We'll all be talking about how can we get there.
Rocky River is a significant water, I mean, you know, discharge location. I don't, we'll be able to go above 40. But that's the reason we did the model of the entire river. So we can show them like that. You may not want us to do that, but the model and the science says we're fine to do it. So.
Okay, thank you.
The Charlotte agreement, what is their top number?
Well, man,
So if we choose an option that is not expanding Rocky River, how do we handle them? If we decide to build capacity elsewhere for ourselves, Charlotte doesn't have any triggers to require us to expand?
they do have triggers. If they want it, they can file a request for us to do it. And if we choose not to, they can do it and pay for it.
So if they expanded Rocky River for capacity just for them, they would pay presumably that entire cost.
Okay, that's what the contract says.
That's good. There's one good thing in there.
And we're not sure if they'll go above the 9.
Right.
We haven't factored it in here. We would like, if we do another expansion, just do it on our own, but we keep all the capacity.
And with the design build experience, do you think that would be something we would consider pretty heavily for the next expansion as well.
Yeah, definitely, definitely, just as much for as anything as having more control over the selection of your contractor to be able to keep your existing plant in operation as you're moving through it. It's so critical, and it's gone so well for us.
Yeah, I'm just amazed at how much interaction we have weekly with contractor and the engineering firm. I mean, it's constant.
Well, I think on the 40 million or whatever it ultimately is, I think we're in a whole different world now. I think we've learned that in the past couple of years with where we are, is that there's gonna be more growth than we have capacity for, and we're just gonna have to decide how much we want to spend to facilitate it. It's not about projecting growth that may or may not happen. It's gonna be there. It's just how much do we want it? And how much are we willing to pay to support it? We've never been there. It was always, we got all this capacity, project all how the growth is gonna happen to eat that up, and now we're like most other places that are fast growing. We were spoiled for a decade with excess capacity, so. The other thing I was wondering, and I mentioned this to Mike before the meeting, is, some of the interceptor and force main projects that are sort of in this prior to 2030 range, how many of those are critical? How many of those, I mean, if we don't have capacity, you don't want a dry line built, and waiting on capacity. So, can some of those get shifted? I know this is, I assume, when debt service hits or when the financial part hits, not when you start the project.
Yeah.
If you start the projects in 27, 28, and they actually hit the financial, financials in 30, 31.
Before he answers, this is just playing away.
No, I know.
I always said the guy down at the bottom, that 72 hours.
It could have an impact on what we just talked about if some of this stuff gets shifted beyond 10 years.
We can shift it any way the board desires, but
Yeah, I don't know enough about,
Right. Really, we try to put things in here at the worst case of when we think we're gonna need it, with kind of an idea that maybe we won't need it quite then. Several of these projects are like, for example, the Wolf Meadow Branch parallel interceptor. That's all hinged on Red Bull and what ultimately happens there. And that they come at the over 1 million gallons a day, and then you still have 500, 600, 700 acres out there that could get additional service. We're looking at wet weather flows causing concerns in that line. So if Red Bull commits, that line needs to be paralleled to be safe there. That one's not a huge ticket item, but when you get down into the Mount Pleasant force main, it really comes down to how much and where Mount Pleasant grows. Once again, this master plan, unlike master plans in the past, has 4 years of extremely wet weather, or extremely high wet weather data that's going into some of the models that are projecting wet weather flows and where they're at. And as we all know, interceptors reach their capacity at wet weather events. And so some of these may not need to happen at these time periods. There's nothing on here other than Wolf Meadow that is at a point of critical if Red Bull comes, meaning that it needs to happen before they are fully online. But look, that's a pretty simple project, not a real complicated project, not a huge line there to do that in the timetable that they're going to be operating under. So we will obviously evaluate that here and look at their needs.
other than Lower Cottle is critical, and it's already funded with the state money that we receive. For the majority.
Well, the Back Creek Interceptor extension's already on our radar screen as well. Haven't we talked to Charlotte Water about that and actually delaying that project?
It's been delayed out to the end of the 10-year.
Right, that's what I was looking at. You get it down in 33.
Yeah, there's a portion of that that's gonna be neat. The model shows it's gonna be needed just to service Harrisburg's growth. So just the Cabarrus County portion that
Number 7.
even if Charlotte Water was determined that they did not want to become a customer at that point of the county line, that we would need to do a much smaller project to continue to be able to service Harrisburg. If Charlotte Water ultimately decides to send more flow that way, then that would get extended. And I will say we had a meeting recently with Charlotte Water, and they expressed some pretty serious hesitancy of whether they would be ready to participate in another expansion within the next 10 years. Because they've got some IVT concerns of their own. They've got some other things that juggling on their own, so they did express some hesitancy there of whether they would be ready within the next 10 years for more of that.
Okay. Any other questions on the CIP?
We will get the detail in the booklets and I'll print out the electronic copy of the details each project. If you can review. If you have any questions, please ask me.
Okay, moving on, the allocation of wood capacity.
Like, this is ours to talk about, right?
Again, we don't have to do this now, but the sooner we decide on how we want to allocate the 26.5 to the 30 member jurisdictions, the 2.1 million. We need to get those agreements through the jurisdictions so that when we get approval from the state to do those allocations, we can turn those loose. So I think the discussion was whether we're going to stay with the 5-year average as the allocation or whether we're going to do some other method.
One of the things I think we touched on, you were here, is the Mount Pleasant amount. You know, a lot of the reason for that base amount was to make sure you guys had an amount to actually, you know, enough to do something with. And I know that there's a development there that looks to that it's likely going to eat up what you have. I mean, one of my concerns, and again, I think I hinted briefly last time, but went back and dug into some numbers, and you guys got about 65,000 this last time. Based on straight percentage, they're only going to get 30, you know, until 2027. That is like, that's barely a neighborhood, like a small neighborhood. So I do have that concern. I mean, we've run some numbers on, you know, do we, if we want to get them, let's say, to 50, right? If maybe not a base amount for everybody, but if our goal is to get Mount Pleasant maybe to 50, that would be a need of 20,000 more. And if we divided that up by the percentages, obviously Concord giving 60%, everybody but them contributing a little bit to make them whole. That's one option. The other option I think that we're willing to consider is have Concord simply contribute that, similar to kind of what we did with our base last year or last time to Kannapolis, is potentially Concord just go straight percentages, and then Concord will give Mount Pleasant that 20. My gut tells me that 30 is just going to be tough.
We've got the big neighborhood. We've got a huge church now that's building between 49 and 73. Which doesn't have sewer right now, but they're gonna be, hopefully they'll hook on. Looks like we're gonna extend the line maybe from Skyland over to 49, somewhere in that general vicinity, because they don't have any connection right now. And then we've got it used to be the school, and that is a church, and gonna be some other things too. And we're opening up what is it? I don't know what you can have axe throwing and restaurant, and that's the old Tuscarora mill. So, but that's already got capacity. I mean, it's already got a sewer connection. But the new neighborhood is huge. If you haven't seen it, down between 49 and 73, up to about comes out about. Not sure about where Moose Road comes out at. That's a huge neighborhood.
Yeah, my gut just again tells me that having to get till sometime into 2027 and only have 30,000 gallons, that just feels like I mean, we're all going to be tight, and we know that we're in it right now. we see clearly what this is, but again, that's just my comments off the top. I do think we should consider at least some sort of an add to Mount Pleasant's amount, just to make sure they have something to continue moving for for years to come.
So does that mean, Jeff, that anything Midland gets comes out of your portion?
So that would still,
Or is there a question about all that?
so, well, it's the one big question. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, right now, it's still us, so anything in Midland that flows to Rocky River would come out of ours. If we were to separate, you know, as we've discussed, then I think that would have to be part of our negotiation with Midland through that process, but yeah, all that would come out of our I wouldn't see I think we would just sub-allocate that to them out of ours and wouldn't expect this board to have to make
If
it.
they're added to this board, I mean, probably.
Right. Well, I think even not, I mean, eventually, if they're their own system, they're gonna need an allocation eventually. But if this one is gonna hold us till 27, then I think that we're making that decision now. If we break apart, we have to agree with them to take part of our allocation, and this board wouldn't have to deal with that potential question until 2027 when we.
Is there
I
anything
guess,
in
William, we
that,
do this again in 27?
Yeah, that's what we're kind of playing now.
is there anything in their system that's contributory to Rocky River?
So,
I
yes.
asked that question last.
So this,
Great question.
the Cedar Vale Pump Station, which is really at the center of really the really dense residential out there in the middle of nowhere. And so there's if you look at the purple, there's sort of a weird shape, sort of a crescent to the left where it abuts Harrisburg that kind of runs north and then sort of curves over towards the plant. That section flows north. It's like the only place in the county, I think, where water flows north. And eventually gets to the Cedar Vale Pump Station, which flows to Rocky River. So Midland proper, all of 24-27 south of all goes to Muddy Creek, but there is very little land, but it's where all that high density residential has been focusing for the last 10-15 years with Cedar Vale and some others. So it's very low geographically, but it's pretty ripe for high density development.
So to that point, you know, I know we're putting the cart before the horse on something like that, but from a planning standpoint, as we talk about allocation, you know, it'd get me back to kind of the Mount Pleasant allocation, because I was on that allocation committee at the time, and Aaron was, and we all kind of made handshake deals at that time about base allocations and percent splits. So at that point, that entire group had said, okay, we'll do base allocation now. And we'll make sure that all the smaller community that is going to have this, and primarily that was Mount Pleasant there, but we've talked, you know, some of Midland through Concord and making sure that, you know, they're not missing out too. So that there's not a disproportionate pain for that group. Okay, we'll put some there, but understand you're gonna have to ration that out. Right. And then when we do this again at the first expansion, it's gonna be a straight percentage. That being said, I'm not necessarily against what, I mean, it makes sense, right? You need some base amount, and it doesn't necessarily, if we do it the way you had proposed, it's not like it's taking anything from Harrisburg. I mean, we're 10%. If we're 10% of 20, it's 2,000 gallons. It's not gonna make or break. But as we talk about maybe bringing on a Midland, what would be the base amount that you're gonna allocate to Midland over that 5 years? And it starts to become this issue where we're all turning people away. And, you know, as a per capita allocation, we made sure in the first round that we disproportionately sent it the folks that needed it the most, because all the development had really happened in Concord. We had Red Bull, we had the other things. But I do think it becomes an issue if that becomes the trend, where we over allocate.
Sure.
To those communities. I'm more than happy to entertain it. Don't get me wrong, but I do see a problem as we start entertaining a Midland, or we do a third allocation. It's like, well, we ran through it again. We need another base allocation. Because we all kind of gotta share in the rationing, so to speak.
And you gotta keep in mind, they also have the Muddy Creek plant, so they have two sources of where they can put their wastewater.
Do we have a sense that for Midland? An extremely high percentage would be served by Muddy Creek? Is it 90%? I mean, is there much?
Yeah, probably north of 90. I mean,
That
geographically,
you talked about is not a lot.
it's not a lot.
Okay.
I mean, it could be a lot of homes.
Yeah, but
You could cram a lot of high density on there, but the vast majority, probably not north of 90%, would go to Muddy Creek.
Well, didn't they ask, in a meeting with them a few months ago about the western project? If we go to Rocky River, that's where they want to concentrate.
Yeah, well, so there was a big residential project that actually contractually we made a deal with Midland on how to Concord and Midland agreed on how we were gonna handle that area. And it was a real win-win for everybody, but I don't know what the status of that project is. But the thought process, at least, I don't want to speak for Midland, but the way I understood it was that large development would then allow them to sort of fall back to the crossroads in the old downtown and actually start to develop the inner portion of the town of Midland. That without sort of the tax base that project would have given them was going to be hard to be that selective and that targeted. So I'm assuming that's still the same deal. So we've already made that sewer deal with them. And if that development works out, then I think you'd see a lot more targeted development down towards Muddy Creek, very intentionally on their part.
Since I don't know the names of them, on 2427 west of 601. We're just about where Flow Store Road comes in. Is that there's a big subdivision that's being expanded with some really nice homes in that area. Where is that subdivision? I guess right now it's all on septic tank, but is it part of the connection? If so, which way is it going? Is it going to Muddy Creek or is it going to come to you? You know which one I'm talking about?
I know there's Midland Crossing, which is just being built. If you're coming out of Midland going towards Charlotte, it's on the left.
Yes, that's the one.
You had to ask where that one goes.
Midland Crossing,
Does it go to that? Okay, if it is indeed Midland Crossing, then it does go.
anything south of 2427 goes to Muddy Creek.
Okay.
Some, a little bit north goes, but everything south goes to.
Well, the closer you get to Crossroads, the more north you can get into Anderson, I guess Anderson Creek. Yeah, it flows back and would go to Muddy Creek eventually. And then there are some areas.
The Caldwell Basin.
Yeah, so but when you get down towards the Caldwell Basin and 427, there could be some south like by pump stations.
Yeah, and we've had some ask and just because there's some places there, you're so far away from gravity sewer. On the south side, it would be I think we've talked about some of those basins before. A lot of industrial opportunity along the railroad, there's just nothing there yet. And that's one of the first questions they ask, well, can we send it the other way? And we try to fight that off as much as we can. It's just not the right thing to do. Somebody's gonna have to build it. So yeah, I mean, I see your point. You're exactly right.
It's a concern, especially, again, we had multiple meetings. Some of them were pretty contentious. Mike remembers, about the future of it and how that would work. And I assume other jurisdictions have behaved, the way Harrisburg was, where I don't think we've allocated 65,000. I don't think we've allocated 30,000 since we've gotten it, because we're pacing out for future years because we know we have bigger projects coming and we have to save that. So, that's a concern for me, knowing kind of the background and history of it.
So do I hear that up until 27? That any allocation that goes to Midland comes via you, unless they find a way to get on the board and they have their own capacity?
That sounds right.
And maybe the second part of that was the legal question to William about that part of it. Do they automatically get capacity if they get a seat on this board?
Well, and I guess
Still
in,
go through
in my head, I kind of separate the two. That just being on the board wouldn't give you an allocation. I think we would have already given them an allocation. Concord would have already assigned them. When the day we split, we're gonna have to hand them something.
But wouldn't that be, we'd have to make that decision, wouldn't we? I mean, it's,
Yeah,
you don't have the
board.
authority to give your, I mean, you can have,
Yeah, they,
Sub-allocate
Concord could
it.
allocate part of theirs toward Midland without this board and without WSAC. But
if they have a separate system and Concord's made that deal,
that's right.
can they send part of their allocation with that system officially? And then that becomes, I mean, I'm fine with that. I'm just, is that this board's authority to?
Yeah, that-
And then we give it Midland.
I think this board would have to because it changes every year. I mean, you could assign a future
What you
allocation.
had for that year, maybe.
But next year,
Any true up is gonna have to officially affect them and us and you and, right, that's a good point. So we may need to understand and then maybe Concord proposes that an official reallocation that includes them. That then would include them in any future true ups plus or minus in the future.
I think that the biggest issue is it starts to, you know, we're all paying for that allocation through our plan expansions. So there's be a disconnect if they are not paying for those expansions, but getting an allocation. So that's I think that's gonna be the issue
I'm assuming
in some way.
back to that fixed. and
They have a line, yeah.
Yeah.
Rate number and that number is not gonna be super attractive.
It's not.
If you're a customer in Midland.
It's not. So that's a pretty complicated thing that we're gonna have to cross that bridge at some point. It's not as. There's two stages of it, I guess. The allocation and then funding the allocation is what it really is. And that's an expensive thing.
You know, I think it's a seat on the board is them having their own system. I mean, maybe that one, first you have one and then the other, but. Own system, seat on the board.
When the seat on the board comes with an allocation, it also comes with a cost.
Well, and I'll also say though, there's even a bifurcation of that, because just because you have a seat on the board doesn't mean you're a member jurisdiction. So it's actually two things. They'd have to become a member jurisdiction. And also a seat on the board. Yeah, that's the more important. The seat on the board doesn't mean the county has seats on the board.
Have an allocation.
So
Right.
I think sometimes that gets lost. I mean, everybody gets it lost in their heads of like, just because you're on the board doesn't mean you have an allocation. They'd have to be a member jurisdiction. Then we would have to, the other members would have to allocate them.
But that comes with both an allocation and a responsibility for the
That's right.
operational cost of
Yes.
the organization. When you're a member jurisdiction.
Yes.
I hope they understand that because that's a pretty.
All the member jurisdictions have to approve that. Am I right?
Yes.
100%. We all have to approve.
So if mean old Mount Pleasant here is a holdout. then-
But back to the central question, I don't have, you know, any real concern about setting some new base numbers if they're reasonable, but. If anybody else has any other thoughts about that. So, in a perfect world, we'd know what everybody's demands are and, you know, and how much who's feeling the most pain of telling developers, no. But that is an impossible thing to quantify, because that's how it should be. The ones that are feeling the most growth, you know. Don't have allocated numbers for something that's not, a jurisdiction is not going to use it, any of us.
And I was just gonna share, you know, the timing, and I think you guys know, but the timing why Michael's bringing it to you now to be proactive is we could really wait. I mean, our current allocation goes until it comes online, which is over a year away, or until January 1, 2025. And so while we're trying to come to you guys now is in the event the state allows us to go over the current permit of 26.5 in the interim. That's when this becomes an issue. If that wasn't a possibility, then we would just wait. This could be done in normal course sometime this year or even in the spring of next year. But we are trying to get ahead of it. But that's not to say it has to be done at this meeting or even next meeting. It's just we do want to get ahead of it in case we have the opportunity to go over the permit for some period of time in advance of the expansion.
Maybe you and Chad and the staff can come up with 2 or 3 alternatives based on what you heard. I mean, you heard a couple of ideas thrown out there and just send it to the board. And then we can start to chew on something specific. I think that's a lot easier to see how it affects all of us and then.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, certainly Harrisburg, Mount Pleasant, Annapolis are not going to object if Jeff wants to give an extra 20,000.
Yeah, that one.
But to your point though, if that base idea, if we shy away from that, and I think you made a really good point. Then, I think we could still facilitate that without calling it a base, I think.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, just semantics, but I think if you called it a minimum instead of a base, and you're not just saying, oh, we're contributing this amount, it's that if you don't get above some minimum, then it's really not useful. If it's 2,000 gallons a year, is what the percentages work out, that's not realistic.
And you remember, I mean, the concessions that Concord made to Kannapolis at the time was based on 2 big economic development engines, and it was a lot more complex than. So that was, and we worked through that, but so I think that's part of it is there's a regional kinds of effort, then we need to facilitate that wherever it is. I mean, that makes sense for everybody. That was the whole Red Bull decision was. It makes sense for all of us to allow that to happen.
We made that provision too in here that, hey, if we have something significant or if somebody's out completely, we're able to horse trade, in this board across jurisdictions and help out. I just, with that base amount, I know it was very contentious and, I know one of the things that no one wanted to do was, okay, if you get an extra base amount, pay an extra fixed rate amount. You're not getting 2%, you're getting 4%, pay 4%.
4%.
Well, hold on. I don't know if I want that. So I think there's lots of complicating things that go into it. Even though in principle, I think it's very well meaning, and I don't know that it's as impactful. Certainly not to Harrisburg and probably not to Concord. Normally, what we saw in all our negotiations was Kannapolis was the one getting squeezed because not that you have any extra at Concord, but Concord was the big player and the proportions didn't change significantly for Harrisburg.
Stuck in the middle.
Something. So every time we moved the pond from one side to the other, Annapolis either was way out of whack on one side or the other. So I think there's ways to do it and get some suggestions back.
William, when you said a moment ago that we needed to be talking about this now in case the state allowed us to go from 26.5 to some other number higher than that. Is that the same requirement that we need to make a decision now in case the state decides to let us go from 80 gallons per bedroom to 72 gallons per bedroom? If Chad is wonderful Monday and it convinces them to let us go to 63, that all can be
done
adapted
right
within
now.
what we're doing.
That would come out in a distribution now under the current.
Okay, that wouldn't
It's
require.
just that
this
right
faster.
now, our current interlocal just goes up to 26.5. Right. So in that case, we'd still be at 26.5. We just have more paper capacity.
That's what I thought I understood you were saying.
Right, and we had a very productive meeting with the state, a virtual meeting, and have submitted to them proposed language for the planning addendum that would be included with a flow acceptance above to capacity that's above the 26.5. We haven't heard back. That was just submitted this week. But that will happen. The good thing is I don't think anybody's out of actual capacity in WSAC's eyes yet. You may be from a internal planning side, but all that's going to really require that we propose and states verbally agree to it is that we update that flow acceptance of what our schedule is, what's our substantial completion expected date, and that we have a timeline or a schedule from the development project that states this is our schedule and we will not be any faster than this. This is the earliest we will bring anything online, and that is beyond the completion date of that project. And the state seems very comfortable with that, especially since we're under 80% capacity, and I don't really see any holdups there. But I don't think that's an immediate issue, but I do think that'll be nice to have that bullet in your gun within a jurisdiction to be able to allocate to a project beyond 26.5.
So is your meeting on Monday a consideration of a further drop in that allocation per bedroom? Or is
Well,
that
it's a
still sitting on the
meeting to
table?
Discuss the proposed legislation that they're moving for. So it's a meeting with DEQ staff and about 5 or 6 non-DEQ people such as myself. And some rough draft legislation that they have now that we've reviewed, they reviewed, and we're both bringing our ideas to it to try to more focus or narrow down what that legislation may look like. And that'll address everything from flow factor reduction to interbasin transfer to 4 or 5 big ticket items.
For this new great classification of fast growing communities. Right, great.
Correct. But that's not gonna be, it's done a month from now. You know, unfortunately, I'm probably gonna make several trips.
All right, well, is everybody comfortable with staff coming up with a few ideas and let the board chew on it? Maybe bring it back up to the next meeting for continued discussion.
When you do this, are you looking at just low allocation, or are you looking at making the debt service follow it?
Depend how far we get, like. The further we get, the bigger impact that makes, you know. You know, 1/10% here and there is not gonna make a big deal, but 1% or 2 starts to add up.
Current debt allocation is
It's on 5-year.
5-year average. So, I mean, the two should be the same, whatever that is, I think. I mean, if we're gonna tinker with the you know, the allocation, gotta tinker with the debt too, I think. That's just my opinion.
I agree.
I think it's accurate. And I had heard at least, 3 options here. One, leave alone like we'd originally done. Add 20,000 to it and split it based on those allocations. And maybe just feeling like
Generous.
very generous and giving it out, but
But I think add the debt to it.
yeah, and I'd like
See what
to.
that looks like for the jurisdictions too. You know, what the.
Yeah, you may not want it.
Right.
I mean, realistically, you may not want it.
That cost benefit analysis. Okay, any other discussion on that? All right, we'll roll on. Got some reports. Don T. Howe.
For all that discussion, I feel like I'm giving that first presentation after lunch. Conference. I do have all here, pretty good news here. I do have a lot of pictures for you, so that should be fun, especially as we get into the plant. As most of you know, we were at the board several months ago with doing some dredging that's going to be needed around Kannapolis's intake. We're getting very close to them starting the work out there on site. So I wanted to update all of you guys on what's going to be happening there, kind of what that's going to look like, because it's a pretty high profile area there, a lot of traffic by there, and everyone may be wondering what's going on or getting calls about what's going on. So I just wanted to update you real quick. Oh, yeah. All right, so I think everybody pretty much knows this, but the lake here, down here where Highway 73, Concord Water Plant, their intake's down on the southern part of the lake. We move way up the lake towards the northern part here is where Kannapolis's intake is. Obviously, it's shallower up there. That's the headwaters, much more challenging with sediment buildup and everything over time. So the proposal is to dredge around the raw water intake for Kannapolis, so they have the ability this coming spring, summer, fall to pull water as needed into their system, pull raw water into their system. This right here is a little bit hard to see, but what I want to focus on is you get to the purples and the pinks, the darker pink, especially when you get right in the kind of in the center of this bullseye, is the depth of sediment. So this is the amount of sediment that's built up down to bedrock. And if you move over here, you see some of these numbers start getting up 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 foot deep. So this particular area where close to the intake is really where a lot of the work's going to be taking place, is to remove this sediment and to make that depth deeper and an ability for Kannapolis to be pulling. The average area, we're pulling over a 4,000 square foot area, and the average depth in that area is about 9 feet. of sediment that will be removed there. So it's a pretty significant amount of material that's gonna be moved out of there. This will be done using the floating dredge that you see kind of there to your left that will be pumping and pulling that sediment up off the ground. Pumping it into dewatering bags that will be on a graded area on WSACC land there close to the lake. These dewatering bags allow that sediment to what I'm saying, dewater and drain out. Luckily, water comes out of this material pretty easily, pretty quick. And then the bags will be cut open and that sediment will be disposed of. The adjacent site, which is owned by WSACC, has been prepared. So there was some grading work that was done out there to accommodate the dewatering tubes, and dredging work is anticipated to start later this month. So does anybody have any questions on that project or that work that's going to take place?
Historically, how good is this kind of operation for? I mean, do we have any data on, you do this is another 2 years, 10 years? I mean, does it just depend?
We really don't, because that intake just has not been used or ever been used regularly, you know, at least in my years at WSACC, because you had either the period where we were in such drought that the water level was down so far that it was almost not available, or maybe not available at all at times. So I don't know that we really have a good history on there. And then every storm's different. You know, you have a couple back-to-back major storms, then I would imagine you're going to see some filling back in. But I do think this is a process. A good bit of the cost associated with this project was prepping that site, doing it the first time. Once you have someone that's done it and they've been on site and they've got a spot to dewater and they know what they're getting into, it probably becomes a little more economical over time if you do have to do it again in 2 years or so.
Chad, I don't know much about that intake. Is it just a static elevation, or do they have the ability to pull from different elevations?
I think there's just a single,
Just one?
it's not deep, but it's on like 10 feet there. So I think they just have one depth to pull from.
And where are you taking the dewatered material? I know I asked you and I've already forgotten.
We've got that large, the site right there close by, that 100 or so acres that's right there. We'll probably dispose of it there. I mean, it's like, I think it's gonna be 3,000 or 4,000 cubic yards. It's not, I mean, it's a good bit of material, but it's not an unreal amount of material. And it should be pretty good stuff. Shouldn't be horrible.
Any other questions on dredging?
How long do it starts later in March, and how long?
It's about 6 weeks, I think is what they're anticipating. 6 weeks.
All right, okay. Roll on the treatment plant.
Right, so I'm shaking it up, doing it a little different this time. So I've got you a bunch of pictures, a couple videos and things to look at. Project is continuing on, work going on everywhere on the plant still. It seems like you can't turn around without running into luckily we don't run into them, but almost running into crowd or trucks or people everywhere you go. But it's really been a very good example. Michael hit it on earlier of the coordination between a contractor and WSACC staff to keep everything moving and everything going. It's really been, I wouldn't say painless, but it has worked, and we've kept everything moving. And even though it's a little challenging at times. So I've got about 12 or 13 drone shots that were taken actually earlier this week. So this is all current, up to date shots of the plant. So this is an overview from the plant kind of above our main pump station. Obviously we can see right here and that's right.
Sorry, go ahead. There you go.
Okay. Can I move?
It's bring it over to the right. It's starting on the screen for some reason.
Oh, hold on. I'm trying to.
Do it one more time and just bring it to the right where you do it.
Hit the button.
Yeah. There you go.
So here's the large aeration basin that we've talked about, seen a lot of pictures of right in the middle of the site. Existing aeration basins are there next to the new aeration basin that's going in. This was the site of the old maintenance canopy that was demoed. That's where the new blower building's going, and the new maintenance canopies being relocated over here. kind of a different view. Now we're kind of over the admin building, looking more kind of south. I think Jeff Corley's house is somewhere in the background there.
Somewhere back there.
Again, a look of the aeration basin, and work taking place around it. This is a look further towards the dewatering building area. Here we'll see, this is the effluent, the new, metering flume going to EQ from our headworks basin. This is one of those that was a larger excavation. They've poured and backfilled. We've also got, another excavation, we're just a little bit off screen here. Here, this is all our construction trailer complex, about 8 construction trailers there for Crowder and Brown and Caldwell and others, set up there is next to the import receiving facility. We're now moving over towards the EQ basin. So this is where the 5 MGD EQ basin will go right here in this area. They are down to grade on that. They're actually, you can see a little pipe going in one of the drain lines off the bottom of the tanks coming out. That moves over to the metering vault for the EQ as it leaves, and then down to box 101, which is where the water or the wastewater will return back to the influent line to the main pump station. Just a look from a little bit different angle. So this here again is our EQ, 5 MGD EQ. The larger 12 MGD EQ basin will go right in this area with the next expansion. Just a look kind of from above of that metering vault and box 101, and another kind of look from a little bit higher of an angle. That's the maintenance canopy with the aeration basin. They're kind of behind it. I like to point out, can you zoom in on that picture a little bit, Thomas? So let me show you, zoom in about right in this area, right where that cursor kind of is, to give you a kind of an idea of the size of this basin. That's a man lift with a person working up on top of it, just to kind of give you a little bit of a feel of the size of the basin. It's hard to kind of tell when you're looking at it from above of just how big this basin is, and it's about 22 foot deep. The liquid level will be about 22 feet in this basin. Again, another little shot of that. Looking back again there at the new blower building. This is up towards the dewatering building. This was another pretty good excavation that they did. This is where the new NEF dewatering facility will be. That'll be to handle a bunch of scum, foam and scum that builds up throughout the plant. And then there's just starting on some work around our chlorine contact basins, raising the walls on them some. And then this is the new effluent flume that's been being constructed that I've shown pictures the last couple of months on. So that kind of takes it through those pictures. If you want to go to the next. Yeah. This is a pretty, can I have a mouse? This is a pretty cool tool that Donnelly was the contractor that did the aeration basin. And they did this with their drone to kind of give a look of this aeration basin and how it was constructed. And it's a pretty neat tool because we can actually scroll around. This is where the new blower building will be, that will be providing air to the new basin and ultimately air to all the basins as the expansion is completed. Again, as we scroll around, the new maintenance canopies here, EQ will be in the background there. They're currently working right now on finishing these catwalk areas around the aeration basins. They'll be coming in with a lot of metal work around those handrails and lights, and then they will begin a lot of the plumbing work with installing diffusers and everything in the bottom of these basins. And so I just thought that was kind of a pretty neat view to kind of give a look at the size of this basin and then just the number of people that are working out there at any given time. The last one's we went ahead before constructing the 5 MGD concrete EQ tank and did the blasting for the 12 MGD tank before pouring all this concrete next to it. Let's go ahead and get the blasting out of the way. So we're able to utilize some money from contingency to do that. We actually have a video here. This was the blast that took place a couple weeks ago on site. That was a pretty significant blast. Everything went well. it shook things around there a little bit, but just wanted to, it was nice to get that out of the way before we get a lot of concrete next to it.
How many
So
calls did you get from the neighbors?
I don't know that we did. We had one neighbor that was closest to us, so the blasting contractor had set up a seismograph at their house. And communicated with them what was coming. I think we communicated to several neighbors around there what we were gonna be doing. There were several other blasts before that were much smaller, but that was definitely the largest blast that they did at one time. And they happened to catch a video of it with the drone, so I thought it was a pretty neat little video. They're gonna continue working in about 10 or 12 different areas of the plant over the coming months, coming month, and continue to make progress. We did get an updated schedule from the contractor a couple weeks ago. With that, with some switchgear deliveries and stuff they're looking at now, we're probably looking at a couple month delay. So we've been saying spring of 24, we're probably more looking summer, late summer of 24 now. There's still the possibility that that equipment shows up sooner than we hope, and that is the critical path, is that pieces of equipment. From the nightmares I'm hearing from other projects out there, you know, I don't think that's bad, but I do want to make you guys aware of that. So we're on pace to begin the commissioning process in July. That is what we're kind of tying we're complete part to, because once you're commissioning, you're sending flow down through those lines. You know, you've got a lot of people on site, you know, adjusting, watching things, but you're actually sending flow through the units. And so that's what we're going to consider to be our point from the flow acceptance kind of standpoint, that we are treating wastewater through the plant. With all that and seeing all that, does anybody have any questions?
Any questions on plant expansion update?
And I think with that potential delay, I mean, I think that makes getting the state's approval to release some of that even more important.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, so I see we went out of order. Yeah, sorry about that. All right, so phase 3, 30% cost estimate. We received this cost estimate. You can go ahead to the next page. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we received this in early February. The top bullet will show you why we did not present it in early February, because we immediately jumped into a value engineering. We need to know more about this price and where this came from effort. As you'll see, the total cost came in for phase 4 at about $180 million for the first draft of that. We were obviously surprised by that. We were expecting a number more close to the $80 to $100 million range. So anytime when you're 60–80% above your estimate or expected number, it takes you by surprise. WSACC quickly met with the design build team to dissect the cost and begin a value engineering process. Luckily, there were several things that were quick to kind of identify as things that we could do differently with the project. That was successful over that 2-week period to reduce that to $138 million. Still obviously a big number. To give you an idea of some of the things that we looked at and were able to do, the project originally included taking all 8 secondary clarifiers and retrofitting them for what's called peripheral feed. So that means they get fed from the outside, discharged from the inside to center feed, which is the preferred method. It's the method that's used now. Peripheral feed was more common in the 70s when this plant was built. What that does is you just get better clarifier performance so the plant's going to perform better. Their model said that the plant will perform and meet limits as it is now. It's just when we expand further and want more capacity out of it down the road, we go to 38, 40, whatever, we're going to need to do that at that time. So we were able to pull that out. That was the largest ticket item. We are going to go through each basin as part of this contract and rehab all the metal and make sure we don't find any big issues with any of those secondaries as we move through that, and make sure that they're ready to run for another 6, 8, 10 years to whenever they get touched again. We also, in the dewatering side of things, per the requirements of the state requires that you have a backup for dewatering process wise. So our system is going to require the expansion of 2 centrifuges. Well, we have 2 centrifuges inside. but we have a spare rotating assembly or the centrifuge that we pull out. We take a used one out that needs to be rebuilt. We put the new one in, send it off to be rebuilt. They agreed that was sufficient towards a standby because we had another rotating assembly. So with that, we were able to not have to put in the third centrifuge and dewatering sludge pump with this part of this expansion. And that saved some significant money. I would like to point out this is a 30% cost estimate. So there's almost 20% of the total cost is contingency due to so many unknowns that are just not defined within the design yet of a 30% design. But I will say that in the phase 3, the 30% cost estimate and the 60% cost estimate or the GMP number came out pretty close. So I don't expect just because of the fact that it's early design, that means that we're going to see that 138 number come down dramatically. There are several other design changes that we're looking at that couldn't be looked at in a 2-week period. That's going to be looked at as we move to 60%. So as the team continues to develop the package, we're going to continue to try to identify cost saving measures that make sense. Several of the potential engineering measures are going to take more evaluation time, as I just said. We did do a lot of research, got on the phone with a lot of engineers and others connections we have throughout the state, and found that the average cost per gallon of wastewater treatment capacity under construction now is in that $30 to $40 range. Historically, everybody always kind of talked like $15 to $20 was kind of your number. Well, that is no longer the case. So, and to give you an idea, phase 3 cost was right at $30 a gallon, and we're looking at $34.50 a gallon with these current costs that are there. Another thing, that is total project cost. So that does not take Charlotte Water's portion out of that. That is total project cost. And also, I don't know that I have a complete accurate number, but the Stowe plant, the new plant that Charlotte Water's building, brand new plant, 15 NGD, is, from what I understand, over the $50 a gallon range for that new plant that they're building there. So it's the market that we're in right now. So with that was a lot of information. Any questions, concerns besides it being a big number?
I think our share is about 90 million. It's in the CIP. Already factored shown in it.
You have a little bit larger number in the CIP than that one, I guess, but I think
138.
not that much.
Remind me, I wasn't. Too long. But Charlotte.
Got some of that.
In that number.
We're still in negotiation on that because there's 2 pots of money that they get pulled on. 40% for new capacity that's built, 26.7% cost on repair, refurbishment, or replacement cost. So like the secondary clarifiers I spoke of, we're going to go in and paint the metal, pressure and paint, sandblast and paint the metal. That's refurbishment. They'll pay 26.7% of that. Whereas new tankage or new equipment, the new blowers and stuff like that, they'll pay the 40. Their number will probably, as a cumulative amount, will be somewhere probably in the 35, 36, 37% range.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Jack, a lot of hard work. Good job. All right, we'll open it up for public comments. Anybody see anybody? So we will roll on. Closed session. I hear a motion to go into closed session under GS 143, 318, 11, A1 and A3. A motion?
Second.
Got a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Is there? We got
Yeah, motion adjourned.
a second.
Source.
Second. In discussion, all in favor, say aye.